Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're getting feedback onto the telephone. Go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Mike Manley,
Present.
Linda Bowe, Michael Gordon,
Present.
Shelley Herbold,
Present.
Dean Howard,
Sorry, we
UK
can't hear
Knifel.
you. Here.
Shelley Herbold,
Present.
Dean Howard,
He's going to be absent. I know that.
okay, UK Knifel,
Present.
David Nigro,
Present.
Mark Sims,
Present.
Lynn Davison, present.
Okay, so we have quorum. Thank you. Item 1.02, information item, camp lead presentation by Superintendent Reisman.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Welcome to the board meeting this afternoon. Also want to welcome all of ASDB staff and administrators, and we have some community members here watching on, including students who are involved with the Camp Leap. So I want to introduce who's presenting, Jennifer Hensley or Jonas? I don't know who's. Okay, so I will introduce then. Okay, so introduce two people, Jonas Camp and Karen Feldman. Jonas Camp is the camp director, so I'm going to turn this over to you.
Hello, good evening. Board, President Dr. Sims, Superintendent Annette Reitman, Assistant Superintendent Mr. Rex. Thank you for having us here. My name is Jonas Camp. I'm one of the directors for Camp Leap.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Karen Feldman, another director with Jonas for Camp Leap this summer. We have two students with us who are currently involved with Camp Leap, and it's my understanding that we have a slideshow as well. I'm not sure if anybody knows about that slideshow. So, I'm gonna, Nick, what'd you say? So let's go ahead and do the slideshow first, and then we're gonna have our students speak to you about their experience this week so far at Camp Leap.
Thank you. You were able to see from that slideshow what we've done in just the first 5 days of camp. We've already enjoyed ourselves immensely. I do want to add one more thing. Some of you have known from last year that this was called Transition Camp. With all of the students and staff's feedback, we had discussed and decided to change the name to Camp Leap. And the two students will be explaining why that name was chosen. So I'd like to call those two students up. They will introduce themselves and they'll talk briefly about Camp Leap. Hello, my name is Melissa. I will be a junior, and I go to Phoenix State School for the Deaf. At Camp Leap, we learn about future employment, exploration experiences, jobs that we can apply to. The program helps us to find a career for our future. This program also prepares us for our future. The LEAP acronym stands for Lead, Exploration, or Lead, which helps us develop our abilities. Exploration, explore experiences that we've never had. A is for advocacy, to make sure we advocate for people, that none of them are feeling left out. We want everybody to be involved. And P stands for play, because we do want to have fun also. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Reyna. I attend to Tucson High Magnet School. I'm a 10th grader, and I'm 15 years old, and also am hard of hearing. For the past 5 days, we at Camp Leap have done so much activities of teamwork, communication, and we recently got back from a two-day trip at Mount Lemon, and Monday we went high roping. And we also learned about what is DSAT stands for, is Deaf Self-Advocate Training, which also means what are our rights as a deaf person. Thank you.
And this is Jonas here. So you heard from our students that we already have done a lot of teamwork. Are there any questions for the students? We have a full house of all of our campers here this evening. Do you have any questions about Camp Leap? Shelly's saying, just have fun. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is 1.03, call to the public, or agendized items. Suke, I understand you have those items.
I do, and I've kind of grouped them together by topic, and so the first person I'm going to call up is Mary Jo Muniz.
How many items are there?
There are 5. 4 of them are related to agenda item 3, and 1 is related to, I believe it's agenda item 8.
Okay, so we will do 3 minutes per item.
Hi, my name is Mary Jo Muniz. I'm the lead interpreter with the Southeast Regional Cooperative. On the behalf of the interpreters from the Southeast Regional Cooperative and myself, I would like to publicly thank you and extend my appreciation to the superintendent and the administration for prioritizing the interpreters and their salary. Your commitment to keep the salary competitive while respecting those employed with ASDB in turn helps us to keep our dedication and commitment to those families and students we serve as we provide quality and qualified services. So thanks again for your commitment to us so we can provide commitment to the students.
Thank you. Next is, it looks like Karina Lee.
Hi, I'm Karina Lee. I teach the life skills class here at ASDB. This will be my 11th year as a special education teacher, my second year at ASDB. I would just like to speak to the budget and the salary increases and bring up that ASDB is a school, and we do have a lot of teachers here, but we also have a lot of support staff, and without those support staff, we as teachers cannot do our job to the full extent necessary. I liken it to tying shoelaces. Tying shoelaces is not something we have to do, but is something we do to be safe and to continue moving forward. And I think compensating our instructional assistants is something that we need to do to be safe and continue moving forward. A lot of them work extremely hard and are not fully compensated for that, in my opinion. I was not able to keep one of the best instructional assistants I have ever had in my 11 years because the pay was not comparable to what he could get somewhere else. And he was truly one of the best instructional assistants I had ever had. He was able to work with all sorts of children, not just academic, but also life skills. And that's something that I feel we need to continue and encourage, is having those high expectations for our support staff and to retain those that we've already trained and we know we can trust and keep our students safe. So going forward, I just ask that you keep that in mind, looking at budget as well as the staff. So thank you.
This is Sukay.
Thank you. Can I ask that one of the callers put their phone on mute? We're getting kids in the background. Can everybody put their phones on mute? Thank you.
Okay, the next person up is Megan Mogan.
Hi there. My name is Megan Mogan, and I am a speech-language pathologist here at the ASDB Tucson campus. I have worked here for 13 years. I absolutely love my job. Several years ago, my job title was changed from communications teacher to speech-language pathologist. I didn't know at the time that that would mean I lost my Proposition 301 money as part of my annual salary. I also did not know that this change in title would preclude me from receiving future public education funding that our legislature would pass in the spring of 2018. I know that many of you have toured our campus on a typical school day here or have had a chance to see the work of our amazing cooperative staff. Many of the people you see working with our exceptional students, like me, do not have the word teacher in their title. And they're going to be left out of proposed salary increases at our agency. So I want to please allow me to put this in perspective. I work with a deafblind student in Karina Lee's class whose educational needs outlined in his IEP mandate direct services from, are you ready? A dorm parent, a deafblind intervener, a bus driver, a bus monitor, an audiologist, a school nurse, a classroom teacher, an instructional aide who works with him when his deafblind intervener takes a well-deserved break, an SLP, an OT, a PT, a PE teacher, and an orientation and a mobility instructor. Though his IEP does not require it, this student receives indirect support through the IEP reporting period from his librarian and library tech, his Braille transcriptionist, an IEP facilitator, and multiple administrative assistants. Our cafeteria staff, security, and maintenance support the facilities in which he learns. The proposed salary increase leaves out 10 out of 13 staff members who serve this student directly. That's over 75% of the staff who serve him. The proposal leaves behind 100% of the staff members I mentioned who indirectly support his access to his public education. There is no mandate for legislative funding to go only to teachers. Almost every surrounding public school district has decided to distribute a salary increase to all staff. I want to honor our administration's dedication to transparency and a desire for staff input, but it looks like the salary proposal might have been put together in the absence of either of those things. Please consider the impact this proposal will have on your staff's morale. We have been on an upswing with an amazing new administration and the leadership of Kelly Creasy, our principal at this site. Please show us you value all of us, and please do so with a fair and equitable salary proposal. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. The next person is Kelly Koss.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Koss, and I'm an itinerant teacher with the Southeast Regional Cooperative. I've completed 14 years with the agency, and I'd like to share my input on this budget proposal. As I was looking at it, I was not aware that 69 employees have not been making minimum wage. My supervisor, she's wonderful, has always told me that this agency aims to keep our pay competitive with our surrounding districts. And this may be more reflective in certified salaries, but it doesn't seem to be with our classified staff. Districts in our surrounding areas are giving pay raises to classified employees ranging from 2 to 7%. One district is even increasing by 10%. And it would be a shame to see our staff who are trained in specialty areas, especially our classified staff who work directly with our students, see them leave our agency to work for other districts just to get paid more. As a former Tucson campus teacher, I have firsthand experience seeing the amount of hard work that our classified staff put into their jobs. They keep our programs running efficiently and are vital to our team. I truly hope that as we move forward, that there is an effort to be more transparent as these decisions get made, which involve our livelihood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person is on agenda item number 8, James Wilson, the fourth.
Hello, board members, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Mark Sims, President of the board. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is James Wilson IV, and I am here to represent on behalf of the Arizona Association of the Deaf as the president. I'd like to explain a little bit about the topic I'm going to be discussing, which is early intervention. My background of who I am, first of all, is I am a native Tucsonan. I was born and raised here. Born here in Arizona State. And moved when I was 5 here to Tucson from Prescott. But I walked the very halls of the Tucson campus, so I know this school, it's in my heart. I was raised in a family who can hear, but one who used ASL. I graduated here at ASDB, moved on to Gallaudet University, graduated there, and came back to my community. So that's a brief introduction of who I am. I want to talk a little bit about the early intervention and what the board and the community can do to help reduce the controversy of the different methods of communication, whether that be ASL, oral language, auditory language, whatever best method is decided for that individual. But I think it's dangerous for our community to disclude any of those methods and become selective. I think instead we need to work together, share and compromise and be very much aligned within our goals to support our children in their acquisition of not only ASL, but their literacy skills as well for their reading and writing. So regardless of what opportunities are available to them, don't provide just limited choices, but to give them all choices and opportunities to develop themselves and so that they can identify with one as an individual. So going forward, I would like to see that the early education for our deaf and hard of hearing children change in a way that we have some early intervention in the sense of the deaf and hard of hearing community, and not only the signing community, but I think that needs to be part of our discussion, to be very much inclusive. And that is my piece that I would like to share. And thank you very much for listening, and have a nice evening. Take care.
Dr. Sims,
Thank you very much.
that's the last public comment on an agendized item.
Thank you very much, CK.
Sure.
So next is items 1.04, executive team reports. We'll start with Richard in Business Services.
Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. You have my board report before you, and it's 2 pages this time, which is a little bit different because it has some information about the budget and where we think we're going to spend money this year. So if I can answer any questions, I'd be glad to do that.
I have a question, Richard. Is this your last board meeting?
It is. Unless I come back as the public to talk to you. No, no, it is. It is. It is.
I would like to make a comment. That is, Richard transitioned to this agency when the agency was having a very difficult time, including issues with financial transparency and a lot of controversy and antiquated business systems. And he really dug in and brought this agency very far forward with his very hard work. And he deserves to be thanked extensively for his dedicated work. And we hope his retirement is awesome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay.
Next is HR.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Dr. Rex. In your board packet is a copy of our HR Human Resources report. I'd like to take a moment to highlight a couple of items. We ended the year with having a staff recognition event on our Phoenix campus where we had bagel sandwiches for all of our heroes. Our slogan was, "Come round our way, we're raising our hands in appreciation of you. You're everything to us, and we want to show you that we're plain grateful." We also ended the year with providing our regional cooperative areas with the end-of-year cookie cake for each of the areas at their end-of-year gatherings. I also provided in my report our responses to our feedback survey that we received this school year that we sent out to all our staff members. At this time, I'd like to make myself available for any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is information technology.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims and members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. You have in your board packets a copy of the IT department board report. The year started, or this summer started out very busy for IT and going into the summer. And I included a lot of generalized information in there. Just we have a lot going on with moves and system maintenance. But at this time, I'd like to make myself available if you have any questions that I can elaborate on. Board President Sims.
And I had the mute on. Next is
Thank you.
Assistant Superintendent Report.
Good afternoon, President Sims, board members, Superintendent Reichman. You have been submitted our principal and director's reports, and I am here to answer any of those questions, but I just want to kind of let you have an idea of what summer really means at ASDB. It definitely doesn't mean just because the calendar's done and graduation's happened that things get slow or lazy by any stretch. Our staff has been on and off this campus doing many things getting ready for the new school year. We have the ASDB Tucson campus working on their The Leader in Me, as well as the National Geographic ELA curriculum that we are rolling out and training our teachers so they can hit the ground running in August. PDSD has been very busy along with their Love and Logic and the ELA rollout. The Tucson campus hosted Camp Abilities last week, and we have kids here having a fantastic time at Camp Leap. So our campuses might be looking a little different, but there's a definite buzz and hum of activities that remains. Our cooperatives are also busy. The supervising teachers came down and did a 2-day retreat, which they set up and designed. I'd like to give a shout out to SER Director Pia Benson, as well as SWR Wemmy Walls, for coming in and working with them and collaborating and having a 2-day experience that really helped our supervising teachers become one. They're finding out that they're quite consistent in some ways, and we have room to grow and develop in others. So that has been a really good experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Operations is next.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. Before you have my operations department update. A couple of things I'd like to point out. One is, and I'd like to give some kudos to Mr. Albert Duff, my facility manager down here in Tucson, who was looking over the landscape contract. We found that going in-house, we can save upwards of $50,000 a year. So we're moving forward with that. The second one is trying to get bus drivers. We've had 2 job fairs with the help of Human Resources, Media, and Communication. We've all come together. The first job fair, we netted 3 individuals. 2 are already on staff being trained, and today was the second one. We've got 9 candidates, one of which we've offered, extended an offer to. So hopefully they will all be trained before school starts, which is positive news. That's all I have. Can I answer any questions for?
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Media and Communications.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendent Rex. Before you have a copy of the board report for Media and Communications. Before I open it up for some questions that you may have, I'd like to highlight a couple key things. And really it speaks to collaboration across the agency. I think when I first started, I didn't really quite see the level of collaboration we're having internally and externally with partners. And so as an example of that, just one example is the ECF funding request. That's a 3-year-long effort. That was triumphant at the end. That was a tremendous number of people internally in the agency who came together to make that happen in almost all divisions, as well as external partners from the deaf and blind communities, from government champions, including Paul Boyer, and actually Maria Sims was a co-sponsor on that bill as well. So we had a lot of support along the way. And that's something I think we should be very proud of as an agency. We accomplished something very large. We had about 200,000 what I call positive impressions for ASDB in the last 2 months. That consists of traditional media and social media. And what that means is it's starting to really change the impression of the agency. I'm getting feedback on what does that really mean, right? Well, what it means is when I talk to Annette, when she goes out to conferences now, people come up to her and say, wow, I've heard great things about you. You know, we're getting word that people across the U.S. who are prominent in deaf education and blind education are now following us on social media. And they're looking to us as examples. They're sending emails to Aaron Moya, who's in charge of web and social media, on, hey, how can I create a website like yours? And so we're really proud of the fact that we're helping to, what does that mean? It means we're telling the story of ASDB in a positive way, but actually we're telling the story. We feel it never was told effectively in the past, and now all the great work of the people behind me and more is finally being told. And we're talking about student and staff success stories. Some other key things that are happening now beyond the media and how we're presenting ourselves is the data that we're giving to decision makers. And I'm happy to say that we have a record-breaking participation on all our surveys now. We are giving the results back to decision makers in half the time we used to. So it's more timely and it's more useful for them to know how to improve, right, their internal operations, how to provide better service. As an example of that, and I've never seen it this high for an agency this high, the full-time employee participation rate on the last job satisfaction survey was 86%. And that's really remarkable considering we had about 550 full-time employees. So that is my board report. And at this time, I'd like to open up for any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Thank you, Ryan. Great work.
Thank you.
Next is Superintendent Reichman.
My turn, and I have a lot to say this afternoon. There's a lot been going on in the last.
I'm sorry, you have a 2-minute time limit.
Sorry, I'm going to go way past the 2 minutes, so you'll just have to bear with me.
That's great.
One thing I want to point out to you is that there was an article just last week on June 4th, and the Capital Times newsletter, a really nicely written article about how the state legislature provided funding for our programs and our requests. And in that article, there's a little story that I thought was really cool. It talks about Representative Paul Boyer. He was going door to door, I think because he's getting ready to campaign for this fall election. But one neighbor that he knocked on the door, the man answered the door, and that man's wife worked at Phoenix Day School for the deaf, and they have 2 deaf children. So the wife had the opportunity to personally thank Representative Boyer for his advocacy and efforts on our behalf, which I think is really, really awesome. So I want to take a minute to recognize for us, the ASDB, being able to get funding for the early intervention through the House Bill 2022. We got $2 million for the next year, which is phenomenal. And then the next House bill was 2108, which made sure anytime the state legislature provided additional funding to increase teacher salary, we were automatically included. Because last year they had provided a 1% increase and ASDB was not included. So this time we were included. And that's huge for us and shows that we are already in the problem-solving mode now. When I started my first year, I spent the full year just listening and learning and seeking to understand. My second year, which I'm finishing up my second year, was really intended to focus on building relationships and trust. But at the same time, I realized that we needed to start problem solving earlier than anticipated. We are problem solving. There's a lot of things going on within the agency. And that really struck me when I was preparing for the town hall meetings. Last January, the Tucson Deaf Advisory Group advised us to do town halls with the deaf community and with the blind community because they wanted to know what we were doing. And I did 4 town halls, 2 in Tucson, 2 in Phoenix, one for the deaf community in Tucson, the deaf community in Phoenix, the blind community in Tucson, the blind community in Phoenix. So we did 4. And the presentation was the same. I talked about 5 initiatives during those presentations. We videotaped one and we made clips which were then posted on to Facebook. So if you're curious and you want to see some of those clips, they're on Facebook right now. But we talked about, during those presentations, the advanced ed accreditation, which we're doing the accreditation this fall. It's coming up very quickly. Talked about the expansion of the early childhood family education program. Talked about the school improvement that Dr. Rex just mentioned in her presentation this afternoon. We also talked about the co-ops, the regional co-ops out there, the itinerant services that we're providing, and trying to figure out alternative ways of providing services. And the 4th one was talking about space utilization study. How can we save on space and save on money? We got, even though we didn't have a lot of people come, the people who came had a lot of questions, a lot of comments. There was really intense engagement and interest. And I know that those discussions rippled out into the community because I'm still meeting people who come up to me and say, I heard you had this conversation at the chat with the superintendent town hall meeting. So there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. And for me personally, just being able to articulate, we are problem solving. We're well on our way to really figuring out how we can improve the services and the education that we provide to our students. But that also made me realize, we still don't really have a strategic plan. And you'll notice in your board docs, I inserted a draft proposed list of strategic priorities for your consideration and discussion. I am hoping that at the next July board meeting, that right after that board meeting, we will have a work session where we can talk about both the budget and the proposed strategic priorities. What am I proposing? Well, 5 possible priorities. The first one is communication and relationship building. Now, why is that even in there? Well, we continue to be rebuilding and building relationships. All of the work that we do doesn't happen without trust. If we try to problem solve and do new ideas and there's no trust involved, there's no relationship, then it's all going to fall apart. So I think that still has to be priority, both internally and externally. My communication with you, the board, your communication with me and with the staff and with the community. I mean, every part of what we try to do means we have to have that trust and the relationship and the communication. But I'd like to define that. I'm still getting every once in a while an email from someone that says, you, Annette, wasn't transparent about this topic. You should have included us. So I'm continuing to learn what that word means and how I can improve on my own communication skills with all of you. And it's a work in progress. I choose to believe I will get better because I'm going to make the effort. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is to focus on the early childhood development, their achievement, that we need to be able to not only provide more hours of services to families with the 0 to 3, but we also show better outcomes, that by the age of 3, they are ready for preschool. And what does that mean? And then the third priority is the academic achievement and student engagement, which includes the schools and the co-ops. The fourth is staff and leadership development, our professional growth. It really depends on us to make these changes and for us to get better at what we do. And then the last one is the campuses and facilities that encompasses the IT, the buildings, all of the other things, the budget things. So those are just being presented to you for your reflection and consideration, and hopefully in a month that when we come back together for that work session after the board meeting, you're ready to have a conversation about this and how this aligns with the budget. A little bit later in our agenda, there's some budget information that I'm going to review and discuss with you. And as you can already see, there's tremendous amount of interest and passion by all of us on how we allocate our resources in support of the programs and support of what we do with students. Some of these speakers were very eloquent about that. And then the final piece is I'm finishing up my second year. So it really is time for you to evaluate me again. And I want you to evaluate me. So you have the results from last year. You have the form. Tomorrow, Letitia will be sending out an email to you on what's called a Survey Monkey, and I'm going to ask you to fill that out and send it back to her, and we will put it together. I think we're going to set a due date of July 1st. But as you evaluate me, be thinking about the strategic priorities, thinking about what we are doing right now, what we're right on the front of, and what you think I need to be continuing to improve or change or add or do better. Last year, I think one of the key ones was I wasn't communicating as well as I could be with you. So I really have focused on that, and I will continue to focus on that, is to learn how do I work with you and more effectively represent the agency's work and what we're doing well and not so well, and how we address those. So that's my report, and it went way past 2 minutes, Dr. Sims.
That's great. I have a practical question. When you do the survey, can we please make it so you know who has and has not returned the survey? Because each time this happens, we know that we have a certain number in, but we don't know which board members have and have not submitted their survey.
Yes, we can do that. Yes.
Great. That'll make it easier for me to bother the right people.
Absolutely, yes.
Any questions?
Gordon?
Go ahead, Mike. Thank you.
I was looking at section 4, I think it is, where it's talking about student enrollment numbers. And it has the School for the Blind, ASD, Phoenix School, and then early childhood programs. For the Arizona School for the Blind, as of March 2018, it lists 44 students. That's the complete blind census in Tucson?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I see the next section right about below that is a space utilization survey that is going on, I guess to some degree, based on some of that information.
I'm not understanding the question.
I can see, let's say, with a census of 112 deaf students and 44 blind, I can understand why there's a survey going on trying to assess the space utilization. It's not really a question, I guess it's more of a statement.
That's correct, Mike. So we're trying to figure out what space needs to be used and not needs to be used,
Okay.
or can be reallocated across the campus based on the census.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Superintendent Reichman? That was a great presentation.
This is Mike Manley. I don't have a question, but I want to appreciate the fact that you're tying the strategic plan to the finance that's coming later. I think those two things are completely intertwined, and I think it'll benefit ASDB to have a five-year plan that's completely linked to what the vision that you see ASDB heading towards. So thank you for being so transparent and linking those goals with the financial aspect of ASDB. I think that's extremely important.
Agreed. Thank you, Mike. Any other questions or statements for Superintendent Reichman? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to 2.01, consent agenda items. Approval of agenda consistent with board policy to include items 4.01, 5.01, 6.01, 7.02, and 7.04. Are there any items people would like to discuss?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Wait a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next is 3.01. Information and possible discussion, board approval of agency budget fiscal year 2018-2019, Superintendent Reichman. We're going to be hearing a lot from her.
Yes, 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 yes. You're going to hear a lot from me this afternoon.
That means you heard our feedback on the last survey.
Yes, I'm trying, yes. Okay, the first thing I wanted to get back to you was the question of, does the board have the authority to review and to approve ASDB's budget? And there were some questions about that, some going back and forth. I was also learning with you, trying to figure that out, what that meant. I sent an email to the Arizona Attorney General's office, our representative there, and asked him, in looking at our statutes, this ASDB statutes and ASDB's policies, do we need to add another policy that confers that authority to you, the board, to review and to approve the agency's budget? And as you see, I forwarded his email response to you, and he says that when you read the statutes, and I gave you the citations of the statutes, and you look at the policies, and I also gave you some citations of the policies, you, as the board of directors of ASDB, you have the authority to actively review and to approve the agency's budget. So I wanted you to have that. So then looking at what the policy says, what we need to do, and this is what I don't know, and how do we move forward? How do we create a process and a timeline that allows you on a regular basis to be involved with agency budgetary decision? What does that look like? Do we model school boards, school district boards? I'm not sure yet, but I decided that today we will do a trial run. And that trial run is to ask you to review the salary increases that we are proposing. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But as part of this process, we need to have a finance committee. We've already started with that. We have Mike Manley and Mike Gordon. Those two are on the finance committee. Last week, Friday, I did review the proposed salary increases with them, had a conversation, and they agreed that this was good to present to the full board. So we're starting the process. We're trying to figure out how to do this. With that, I want to talk a little bit about our appropriations, our revenue, and a little bit about our expenditures. Richard Valdivia provided me with some information that I had forwarded to you on June 1st. You might remember an email, but I'm going to restate it. And I want you, if you have notes, maybe write it down and think about this. So when you look at what we bring in, we have two real categories. The first category is the appropriations, what they appropriate to us. And under the appropriations, we have general funds. So when you look at general funds, we know that July 1st, 2018 to June 30, 2019, we will get from the state of Arizona $21,378,000. So $21.3 million, to keep it simple. And then we have what's called ASDB funds. Those are vouchers. It's figured based on our enrollment. So you look at the enrollment numbers for ASB, ASD, PDSD, and they put that together and they estimate the enrollment for the next fall, and then they give us the funding for that. So as our enrollment numbers decline, that appropriation has also been declining. So some of our income has declined based on declining enrollment. But so the next fall, the number for the next year is 11.5 million. So that's our appropriation. You add that up, that comes up to 33 million dollars. That's most of what we bring in. The second category we call revenues, and that's just what we bring in. And the biggest revenue comes from the regional co-ops. They provide services to the local schools, and we get vouchers and or fee-for-services. We anticipate that the revenue for the next year will be $14.8 million. And then we have other grants, federal grants, Title I, Title II, IDEA, Medicaid reimbursement, and whatnot. And that adds up to right around $2.9 million. Okay. Now we have anticipated increases. We will be adding $2 million for the expansion of the early intervention program. So add that $2 million. And we got, because of the recent Red for Ed, some of these staff here mentioned that the governor committed to providing teacher salary increases in 3 years, 20%. And each school district has been making different decisions about how to use those funds. We calculate based on current enrollment estimates and the vouchers that we may bring in somewhere between $1.6 million to $1.8 million in additional funding. We're right now, for the budget purposes, are being conservative. So we're saying 1.6. So you add that all up, our resources, fiscal resources, come to $56,270,000. And I hope you've all been taking notes, because this is what we have. This is our pot of money. So then the next question becomes, where does that go? That's a lot of money. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, this is a lot of money, $56 million. What do you do with $56 million? Okay. This is where Richard's report, he didn't detail it, but he really did provide that information. So I want to go to the sheet where you see the pie chart. That pie chart, that information is right there. Okay, so I'm going to start with what we spend. And keep it simple, because first you need to get the frame of reference before you can start asking the questions. So when we talk about what we spend, Phoenix Day School for the Deaf, we anticipate spending $11.5 million. PDSD. The Tucson campus, both ASB, ASD, we will spend right around $15.4 million. Make a note of that. Then we have the co-ops, the expenditures for the co-ops. We anticipate spending for the co-ops right around $15.9 million. And to just sort of a side note, I looked at that number and I looked at anticipated revenue. Oh, we are projecting spending about $1 million for co-ops, then we're going to be bringing in. So that's just a side note. I saw that almost immediately. And then we have what's called preschool and early. It's called outreach, but it's really early intervention. For the governor's office, what they do is they lump the preschool with the early intervention. So just keep that in mind, because those numbers look different. So you put together the preschool with the early intervention, we allocate around $4.7 million. So that's the 0 to 5. And then the last number is the admin cost. That's $5.8 million. And that's how we plan to spend $56 million. Alrighty, I'll give you a minute here to kind of take that all in, and then we're going to go down to the pie chart here. So when we do $56 million and we allocate it, what's the percentage here? And how many students are being served? At Phoenix Day School for the deaf, that is 21% of the overall budget, with 267 students. Now, the caveat is that 267 is K to 12. It doesn't include the preschool. So that's at a different section here. Causes some confusion sometimes. So K to 12, 267 students with 21% of the agency's budget. The Tucson campus gets 28% of the agency's budget, and we have 127 students, not including the preschool, again, K to 12. Then you look at the co-ops, it gets about 29% of the agency's budget, and they serve 1,110 students. And then down to the fourth category, the preschool and the early intervention combined gets about 12% of the agency's budget and serves right around 657 students. Okay? So your homework when you go home is to read that and think about it and look at those numbers and start figuring out the questions here. And how does that align with the strategic planning, our priorities, and what kinds of decisions are we going to need to make? Any questions?
It's Mark Sims here. I have a comment. I think the Finance Committee should work with you to come up with how the board should stay abreast with the budgeting process. It would seem as you, as a team, the executive team comes up with your budget process, the board should travel along that journey in a lockstep fashion.
Okay, yes. I will reach out to the Finance Committee and set up a meeting and start a conversation figuring out the process of how we can include the board more actively in the agency budget decisions. Yes.
Are there any other board members who would like to be on the finance? If there are, let me know. You don't have to say it publicly.
It's lots of fun.
Any other questions? An essential committee. Any other questions for Superintendent Reichman? Okay, thank you. Next up, 3.02, proposed increase to teachers and staff. Everybody's going to be surprised that it's Superintendent Reichman.
Yes, my turn again. This is your first opportunity to participate in a budget decision. You've already heard from agency teachers and staff their perspectives of how we can become more transparent and inclusive in budget decisions. Our proposal, the intent, let's talk about the intent here. The intent here is assuming that we will have an increase, we're estimating $1.6 to $1.8 million. If the enrollment numbers stay the same with the vouchers we get, because the increase is connected directly to the vouchers and the number of students. So assuming that we get $1.6 to $1.8 million, what is the governor's intent here? Well, the governor did this with the state legislature, specifically to provide increases for teachers. So the intent is to be in line with what the governor and the state legislature plans were for this fund. And as a consequence, I proposed to the Finance Committee, after meeting with Kristen Rex, with Richard Valdivia of Business Services, and with Anita of HR to talk about this a little bit more in depth, and put together a recommendation that from the 1.6 million, that we would allocate 1.4 million for increases to teachers, so that most of the teachers, we have 227 teachers agency-wide. They're the largest employee group that we have. This includes supervising teachers, coordinating teachers, lead teachers, early intervention teachers. So 227, and we have that number right here on this sheet. So 227 teachers, that we would give them all right around 9.5% increase. That 9.5 increase, when you break it down to two parts of that increase. Most teachers get 2% increase on an annual basis. So they'll have that 2%, and then we're adding the 7.5%, which means most of the teachers we have will get the 9.5% increase. The second largest employee base, and I just learned this about a month ago, we have 110 interpreters agency-wide, which is, I think, the second largest employee base. And some of them have not had increases for a number of years. So the intent here is to look at the interpreter's education, years of experience, and EIPA score, which is the Educational Interpreter Proficiency Assessment, which they have to have a score. And then based on that, we would be providing them with increases. And you see the number there, it's $400 and something thousand. And then the last group is, I just learned this, we have 67 employees that are making less than the state minimum wage. The obvious question is, how is that even possible? Well, as a state agency, we don't have to follow the state minimum wage. We're not required to do that. At the same time, I really believe philosophically, we can't not make sure all of our employees get the minimum wage as defined by the state. And Flagstaff is even higher. So we looked across the agency, we've identified 67 employees, and we're proposing to give them the increase July 1st, the minimum wage that would be set January 1st. Because next January it increases again. So just go ahead and provide that increase July 1st and get them up to the minimum wage for January 1st. And that spends $1.7 million. And as some of them very eloquently said, there's a lot of other wonderful, hard-working employees here that, and so you, the board, this is your first taste at making these difficult budgetary decisions. And this is being proposed to you for review and possibly approval.
This is Sue Kay. I do have a question. How many staff would not get a raise?
We have right around 850 employees, I think, full-time, part-time, is that right? Full-time, part-time. So if you want to count all employees and not FTEs, all employees that are full-time, part-time, temporary, whatnot, we have around 850. So as you can see, we're giving increases to half, roughly half of our employee base.
This is Gordon. Annette, with the premise of a sub-minimum wage for as many as 70 or more workers, probably more if you're talking part-time, because when you said 550 before, I'm assuming 550 was the full-time equivalent, right?
Yeah, 550 FTEs.
Right.
Right.
So if
and
there's
about
800
850 employees, and these numbers are employees.
Right.
So that 67 includes part-time temp. And that includes like kitchen workers, janitors, instructional assistants, some of our instructional assistants.
And with the understanding that as an agency, state agency, there's not a requirement to pay a minimum wage, which I understand, but what is the rationale or the premise to be able to offer, besides that they can, what's the premise of offering sub-minimum wage when it comes down? I mean, this is an interesting chart right here when you're talking about 400 people to 550 FTEs, and 150 aren't included. And then out of that, you have probably about 15% that aren't even at the minimum wage. So, I'm trying to understand the rationale for the decision-making, not this decision-making, but how sub-minimum wage can be accepted, or what the rationale is around that.
There is no rationale, there's no intent, it's just not keeping up. Because the minimum wage changes, it changed 2 times in the last 2 years, right? And we've changed once, but we didn't keep it up for the second time. So this time I want to keep it up and then get a little bit ahead of the game. So in January, we're already sat at the state minimum wage.
And
There's
I
no
appreciate
intent, there's no rationale here, it just happened.
Okay. That doesn't really answer the question, just because I'm curious, as anybody in the private sector, we were all required to immediately respond to the change in the wage, and we didn't have any choice. Now, the state agency saying they don't because they just are not required is not really an answer. And I'm not putting you on the spot as to explain what the thinking of, but I find that to be a really unusual caveat or kind of an expedient position.
That's a question to the state legislature? I don't know, I don't have an answer
No, it
to
was
that.
a ballot initiative. So it was based on the wording of the ballot initiative, whether or not it included government or not.
Okay.
So.
And just to throw 2 cents in, like a typical district or charter, they were required, but based on Arizona law and the current code, ASDB is an institution, so they were almost specifically exempt in the Arizona State Hospital. So there were a couple other spots that were almost specifically excluded from that law. And I know it was a hardship for LEAs. Some people, they couldn't afford to have so many staff, but but at least they got the minimum. But if memory serves, when the last iteration of that mandated increase happened, it left a lot of districts struggling to keep their books above water. And I wasn't on the board at that time, but there was a struggle that it seems like ASDB didn't choose to wade into since they weren't obligated to by law.
Superintendent, I know allocating scarce resources is never an easy task, but my question is, do we have any idea of how our compensation package is competitive to local school districts, especially with respect to the non-teacher positions, the people that are left out of this potential proposed salary increase? Do we know if we're behind the market, above the market? Do we have any idea where that is? Because it would be helpful for us in making our decision.
Yes, we do. Human resources, and I'm going to call Anita to come up. Has been doing over the last 2-3 years each classification of employees, doing analysis, market analysis of how our employees' compensation compares with other school districts and other providers. And we have been over the last, I would say, 3 years, because this started before I came on board. We have been updating most of the classifications of our employees, and we're almost done. I think we only have 2 left after we do the interpreter pay that have not yet been reviewed. And those 2 are the dorm personnel, and who else, Anita?
So we have the residential services, the coaches, and also security that have not been looked at.
Coaches and security. So every other classification of employees have been reviewed at least once, have gotten increases at least once in the last 3 years. So we have those 3 groups left. I'm hoping to finish them within the next 3 months, and then we can start this cycle all over again. So Anita, do you want to add something to that?
Sure. So during the course when Dr. Lamer was here, we started looking at the classifications in 2015, and so we were looking at all those classifications. We've also kept a spreadsheet of what we looked at, as well as what increases were given for those classifications, and we can send that to you so you can look at that. And we also have a spreadsheet where we've collected data from increases that the state would give employees, a history of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would certainly find that helpful, especially if we have other data of what other local school districts pay for those classifications typically, and if there's any difference in our compensation package relative to the local school districts. I'm not sure if there is or not, but that would certainly be helpful for me.
We can get that to you.
Any other questions or comments? This is an action item.
This is Mike Manley. Oh, go. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, I was just saying, Mr. President, if we don't take action on this today, what's the outcome for next fiscal year? This is our last meeting for this fiscal year.
That's a great question. So can it be deferred to the next board meeting, is I think what you're asking.
That's precisely what I'm asking.
You recognize that means we postpone the increases of pay to staff. We were hoping to do that as of July 1st.
As a comment, if you look at the intent of the governor, it's a 3-year plan. I know if you look statewide, this plan appears to be somewhere in the middle. Some districts gave teachers between 6 and 7% raise and spread the wealth out, including administration. I think that there isn't a plan that's going to give everyone what they deserve. I'm confident that this plan is, it's the first big step and a very important, it's multi-year step to get us to where we need to be. And that was my comment. I'm sure there can be more discussion surrounding where we're going to go in the future, but I would propose that we move to adopt the increase as written by the superintendent in the board documents.
Okay. Do we have a second for another motion? I second that. Any comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and...
Mr. President, can I make a comment?
Yes.
What's our contingency plan, Superintendent, if after the other local school districts distribute their money in whatever way they do, what's our contingency plan if we are below in certain classifications and we risk retention issues in the next fiscal year?
I don't know that we have any classifications that are below the market salary because we've been updating them in the last 3 years. The only groups that are probably below are the 3 that we've not yet done a review.
Well, right, but even after, as Board Member Medley had mentioned, that some school districts are implementing these salary increases in different ways. So, that market analysis is probably going to change next year.
If we provide the teachers the increase, we would be consistent with the new market.
Okay.
I have a question, comment, I guess. So we would be consistent for the teachers with the new market, but you are potentially looking at a retention problem for your support staff because are they at the current market if other school districts are giving them part of this increase as well?
Anita, can you come up? But I will just say this, one of the first decisions I made as a superintendent in the fall of 2016 was to look at OT, PTs, SLPs, and other related staff, and they were below market 2 years ago in the fall. And they got increases to get them up to the market. We also set up a system that was more consistent and fair in terms of looking at education, years of experience, and all of that. So that group, a couple of years ago, got anywhere between 3 to 5% increases, and a few got even more because they were so below the market. So as of 2 years ago, that particular related service group, we got them up to market. Are they still comparable to market today? Well, that would be the refresh cycle. We'd be going back and reviewing again and maybe do it over each 3-year period of time that we are looking at all employee classifications. I think this has to be an ongoing process. This was implemented by the interim superintendent, Marv Lamer. So when I looked at the teachers and then I looked at, well, who should be the second group, the one group that we have not yet provided increases in the last 3 years are the interpreters. And they just happen to be the second largest classification of employees here within the agency. So that just made sense. That was logical. But I double-checked with Kristen Rex, the assistant superintendent, with Richard Valdivia, the business executive director, and with Anita, the HR executive director. Between the 4 of us, duly look at these numbers and try to come up with a proposal that made the most sense, knowing that there would be others who would feel, rightfully so, they're not getting the increases their counterparts are. But we don't have enough projected increase in revenue to be able to do this agency-wide.
You addressed what would have been my follow-up question, that you have this sort of as a cyclical plan for ongoing increases and review of salaries. So you addressed what I was getting at.
Okay.
Gordon, are the 2% step increases, those will continue every year, and that will be, their inclusion will bring the teacher's salary up to 20% over 3 years? So we can count 6% basically over that 3-year period to be applied towards 20?
In the salary schedule, the 2%, is that what you're talking about? Yes, we factored that in.
I know,
to go.
and in the next 2 years coming.
If it continues to come in from the legislature, yes, that's part of the plan.
Yeah, we can't predict that in the next year, the state legislature and the governor would keep the commitment to provide for increases in the second and third year to equate to 20%. So we're working with what we have right now for the next year. That starts in 2 weeks.
Is there an opportunity to do a retroactive increase if we were not to vote tonight and vote in July?
No, we cannot do that. Logistically, that would be a nightmare. My payroll staff will quit on me.
As compared to your support staff?
Well, I mean, this is David Nigro. I mean, I think there's also the no
Fiscal
gifting
year.
the no gifting clause of the Constitution, which typically may prevent that type of retroactive adjustment.
Okay. Any other comments? We still have a motion on the consider. Any other comments or changes? Okay, we're going to vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Gordon?
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we're going to go to 7.01, information items by Maria Murphy.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. The policies before you today have been presented to the policy subcommittee. All questions have been asked and answered satisfactorily. The policies did go posted online for public comment. The only public comment that was received was some minor technical and formatting errors to 3 policies in the packet. And because it is a first read, I will be happy to make those technical changes and get them corrected for the second read.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, 7.03, action item in the agenda. Any questions or comments? Some people have been very generous, and we're very appreciative of that.
I move that we approve the donations.
Do we have a second?
I second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Second.
Stole your thunder.
All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next is 8.0, intervention allocation, position and resource allocation. I added this to the agenda, and this actually meshes with some of the things that Superintendent Reichman spoke to. I would think as a board and anybody else who attended the retreat at the last board meeting, one thing that became strikingly obvious to me at least was that many of our students are arriving to the schools with inadequate language skills. And this is making the school's job extremely difficult because they need to get people's language skills up to snuff and then start educating them. And we've spent a lot of energy getting the schools on track, and I think they're well on their way, but we need to deliver a better prepared student to the schools so they're not outspending their resources catching up. And so this really comes down to some of the issues that Annette was talking about, and there are two specific issues I'd like to discuss with the board. The first is the reallocation of space on the Tucson campus and a timeline to actually reallocate the space, and considering taking that off as a cost and potentially turning it into a revenue stream by having somebody else occupy the space. That was the first thing I wanted to talk about and seek any comments from anybody on the board.
This is Sukay. I've had some collaborative meetings with Dr. Rex as well as Superintendent Reichman on some possible ideas, and I think one of the things that could be utilized even more so than even what we have discussed is looking at the joint technical ed districts and seeing if they would not be interested, because you are so centrally located in Tucson, in housing some of their JTED programs on campus and using that as a way to collect rent, so to speak, on some of those buildings.
I agree 100%. I would make the comment that it has to be ready to rent or be able to present it to people to rent before you can really go pitch somebody to rent it. So you have to be able to present to them what those actual buildings are and show them to be empty. It's pretty hard to market space to people that's occupied. So,
Dr.
Go ahead.
Sims, if you want information about what we're doing now to reduce the space that we're using on the Tucson campus, we did provide a brief description in board
Agreed.
docs.
What I would like is actually the executive team to come up with a plan of how, by the end of the first semester 2018, the space is ready to be rented. So by January 1st, and we'd like to talk about that at the working session in July. The second issue, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, that's a topic that we can add to the work session in July, yes.
So a plan to get us there. Because the space analysis has been going on for quite some time, but we actually need to consolidate the space and execute it to make it a revenue generating or cost saving change.
The space utilization analysis started when? Albert Duff, when did you start doing that? Just 6 months ago. So we are
Right.
just starting to do this. We're just now starting to look at space. We're starting to move people around. This summer we have several moves that are going on the Tucson campus with the goal of closing out a few buildings. So we're just on the front end of beginning to make this happen.
Okay, so my comment would be we need to make the front end, the middle, and the finish by December 31st, 2018.
I don't think we can do that quickly, but.
Well, we'll see a plan at the next meeting.
I can sit down with the operations and put together a rough proposal. We can definitely do that. There's been a lot of conversation internally, but we can put it together on paper. Right now, the focus has been is just on the low-hanging fruit, the easy moves to make. We have not gotten to the more difficult decisions.
Right, and so we need to come up with a plan because I believe we have to reallocate resources so we can pay our support staff and increase our the language skills of our entering students. The other request would be a plan to transition a large portion of the residential program to slate to see how much we can close of the residential program by the end of the 2018-2019 school year. And a similar plan to be able to do that, including consideration of opening a cooperative up in the northeastern part of the state. So we'd like a plan for that as well for the next board meeting. You guys have any questions or comments about this?
So it'd be a residential program or a day school model?
The residential program in Tucson.
Yeah, would that be a day school model for the Northeast, or would that be a residential model for the Northeast?
Whatever the executive team thinks is most appropriate.
The distance is great in the north. Keep that in mind.
Right.
And we have.
Agreed.
Yeah, you have 20 kids from the north right now in dorms from just the blind side alone. And another almost 20, yeah, just from the northern area though, is what. So if
The
you were-
only, I'm sorry, the only comment I would like to go on record, it's saying in moving towards any kind of residential closure, especially with those folks coming in from the northern area and staying down here, sometimes being mainstreamed as one student in a large campus is not the most least restrictive environment, and I want us to keep that in mind.
Understood totally. Any other questions or comments? Okay, next is 9.01, call to the public for non-agenda items.
We have one. And, let me see. I am not going to even attempt to read this. It looks like maybe Ronald? Yes. Yeah, okay. If he'd like to come forward.
I hope everyone can see me clearly. Hello, board members, superintendent, president, Superintendent Reichman, President Sims, and Assistant Superintendent Rex, as well as community members. Hello, my name is Ronald Hazlitt Weeks, and I have several topics I'd like to speak on. I have been a certified subteacher here at ASDB for probably since 2013. However, I haven't been called all that often, which I feel is concerning because I feel like the staff and the students do prefer me in that position because of the different ways I teach with various activities. I'm I'm sorry, I forgot my glasses. If you don't mind giving me a sec to grab those. I apparently left those at home, so I'll proceed the best I can. Let me just go by memory if I can. I went to PDSD, I would say April 20th, for a teacher organization, and there was a bit of a guided tour as well. I was quite impressed with what's going on at PDSD. I was born and raised in Phoenix, but I attended ASDB. I left in 1966, the month of December. 2 months later, February, PDSD was established. As I entered PDSD and looked around, I was amazed. I didn't know how many students they had at the time, and particularly until an alarm, like a drill, happened. And when looking around, seeing where the kids were lined up and had to stand during this drill, and elementary all had to go out to the football field. So it was a little concerning what I did see, because when the firemen arrived or the policemen arrived, they also come through that same area, right where the students are standing, which I don't feel is a safe place. I think they need to be put elsewhere, either out further on the grass or on the rock area, because that gives more room for the emergency vehicles to come in. Also, I noticed there was a few new buildings there in the center with middle school and high school, which look very nice. And then you go to the elementary school building, and it's pretty clear that it's much older and dilapidated. You go into the classrooms of that building, and I understand from the administration there who led through, there's the walls, the furniture, everything within that building and within those rooms. I mean, everything's kind of everything's in a bit of a corner. There might be one corner where there's a bathroom, another corner where there's a kitchen, and then just the way that it's designed, there's not even wall space for educational posters. And where the new buildings have much more wall space, better system. You could put the alphabet up on top of the walls in the room for the students to have a lot more visuals in their classroom. The old building is pretty bad. And for students who need accessibility in a wheelchair, not each of those doors are going to be able to accommodate their wheelchairs or even some of the paths. If you take a look at even the ramps, because there is major leverage differences in the sidewalks versus the ground coming into that building. When you take a look at the ceilings in that building, they're very old, and it's concerning, the condition of that building, and I would suggest a new building for elementaries on that campus.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, going through my form, my paper here. So again, I was raised here. I went to high school. I would say there's probably, back in my time, we had probably 12 different vocational courses on campus. Anything from woodworking to metalwork, economics, etc. Where nowadays, when our CTE, and I'm talking Tucson campus, there are no classes of any of those vocational type. And in fact, there might be a teacher who's only available for a very minimal part of their day to teach such classes. If you take a look even for this last year of this year of 2018, they didn't print a yearbook because we didn't have a teacher. We have another year coming too that's going to need a teacher as such to be able to complete such work, particularly for a yearbook, which is an important thing for our students. Particularly when it comes to the archive, maintaining the history of our school and our students, so that, but it was quite an impact this year that they didn't have that. And there's friends and students and families who are concerned about this because ASDB didn't hire a teacher who was certified yet in order to do and teach that skill.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. Thank you very much. We appreciate your comment.
Okay, thank you. I apologize I wasn't able to find my glasses to get through this quicker.
Okay, thank you very much. Next are agenda items for the next board meeting.
This is my
Mike Manley, you're the next one.
Yeah, I keep talking right through people. I'm just going to crank right ahead and do that. I'm not sure if this is something that can be done offline or if it needs to be an agenda item for our next meeting. I wouldn't say concerns, but I have a lack of understanding of how the enrollment process works, not only for our day schools, particularly for a parentally placed child that enters one of our schools. This coming from my capacity of my day job, specific to 151342, when you look at how if a child is parentally placed in one of our schools, how that process works. How do we call a team together to look at all the options for that kid to make sure that we're honoring LRE if that's possible. I'm not saying that's a problem, I'm just saying I don't understand how that process works. And then in addition to the parentally placed kids it's a minority of our kids, but may have ramifications that go on, like who owns that child's data, who owns that child's ADM. I don't understand how that process works. That might be something that I can just be brought up to speed on, but it might be something that the board would be interested in. That would also go through the difference between voucher and fee-for-service. So if a child moves in from out of state, how do we as a board or as an agency advise the parent to make that, maybe not even the parent, the LEA to make that determination if it's a voucher kid or if it's a fee-for-service kid or if it's going to be a kid that ends up on one of our campuses. So if you look at the statute, it's pretty clear, and I don't understand what our internal policies and procedures are regarding a child being enrolled by a parent versus a child being enrolled by an LEA versus a child getting a voucher to be in a consortium versus a fee-for-service kid. So if we could
provide a presentation at the next board meeting to go through all of that. We're actually meeting with Lynn Davison on June 26th to cover some of those same points.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
part
Mike.
of that.
This is Lynn. That has been a grave concern of mine as well, so we're meeting soon.
That's good to hear. Well, it's not good to hear that we have concerns, but it's good to hear that we can maybe address them in one meeting. And then part of that would be if a child is vouchered, what does the statute say about who is that? How do we go about making sure that the LEAs are responsible for the kids while at the same time making sure ASDB is serving the kids like we're supposed to? So that's the underlying concern I have, is how do these enrollment decisions lead to better decisions for the state with regard to these populations of kids? So if we could add that, that'd be fantastic.
This is Sue.
Great.
And I'm not sure that this needs to be an agenda item or something very similar where we could have a presentation or some kind of report out. We've talked at several different staff retreat kinds of things on ASDB as the agency becoming the point for parents who have children with vision loss or with hearing loss, and what kind of outreach efforts are we moving towards in that regard? Because I think our enrollment numbers could be very reflective of that type of outreach activity.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other agenda items? All right, next is the worst agenda item, 10.01, adjournment.
This is Lynn. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Just a comment, we're having a work session after the next board meeting. Please plan on attending. Thanks, everybody. Keep cool.